Kill 'Em All is a really special album, not only because it's the debut album of my favorite band, but because it was the starting point to an entire freaking musical genre. So welcome friends to our journey to review each and every one of the Metallica albums before the next one drops later this year or early next year. So before that happens, let's review and rank all of their albums from Kill 'Em All till Hardwired. So Kill 'Em All is kind of the debut album that isn't, basically, because if we remove Anastasia, 50% of the band members in any of the Metallica phases didn't contribute any music to this album. And that was the only album that we got from that era of Metallica, that very ancient phase that few people actually witnessed. The classic lineup of Dave Mustaine, Rob McGovney, James, and Lars. And for me, that's what makes it unique and also quite different. Because if you ask me, Kill 'Em All does not represent 80s Metallica at all. Literally doesn't have any of the features of the early Metallica, such as ballads. The album is the only Metallica album in their entire discography that does not have a ballad of any sorts. Well, more shockingly, the entire album has only one riff with no distortion, and that was on Phantom Lord, written by Mustaine. Can you imagine Metallica, the fathers of melodies and power ballads, had an entire album with nearly no melodic elements? Well, what else? It does not have a meaty, crunchy, slow track. Every one of the 80s Metallica albums has such features, as in For Whom the Bell Tolls, as in The Thing That Should Not Be, as in Harvester of Sorrow. Well, in general, Kill 'Em All is a fucking thrash metal album. It bleeds speed and aggression. So I would see why it doesn't have such a song. Well, another element of early Metallica that this album kind of lacks is long, epic instrumentals. Well, Anastasia is an instrumental, but I would not count it as an epic instrumental. It's more of a bass solo than a song of full value. And that by no means diminishes the value and epicness of the song. Another thing that this album kind of lacks is harmonies. Well, we have one mini harmony on No Remorse. And that happened partially because Cliff wasn't in the band to introduce harmony to James. So why didn't Metallica be Metallica on Kill 'Em All? The answer is fairly simple. They weren't Metallica. They were a whole other version of the band. A version without key members like Cliff and Kirk. The album is classic and everyone knows that. And most of its songs are really underplayed live. Well, for me, the album doesn't have any filler tracks. I could easily listen in just one breath. And one of the things that are just so good about the album is the riff quality. A bunch of 19 to 21-year-olds wrote some riffs that are just so badass, as in Hit the Lights, as in The Four Horsemen, as in Phantom Lord, the riff quality would really tell you that with more musical maturity, these guys would be legends, and it surely happened. Well, speaking of maturity, this album isn't mature at all. The lyrics alone would tell you that. For example, Whiplash. It freaking talks about headbanging. And the original idea for the album cover would also tell you that. But it's fun. It's raw. The whole deal about Kill 'Em All, fast, crazy music. Fast, aggressive music. Well, for the people who say that Mustaine wrote them all, that's not true. Mustaine only wrote 4 songs out of 10 on the track list. James wrote 5 and Cliff wrote 1. And actually, if you think about it, the songs written by James are perceived to be the classics on the album, as in Seek and Destroy, Hit the Lights, Whiplash. Not in my case though. The Mustaine songs kick ass so hard, they are so good, such as The Four Horsemen, easily the best track on the album for me. Really the first epic of Metallica. And yes, it is much better than Megadeth's The Mechanics. It just doesn't work, to be honest. Metallica's slowed out version works more, to be honest. Well, what about solos? Yeah, this album had weaker solos than all of the 80s epics. That's where the album is kind of on the negative side. The solos were too shreddy, repetitive, improvised. They didn't have like distinct melodies and parts that, hook me like other albums. But there are some good solos, such as the solo from Phantom Lord, really good. The solos from the Four Horsemen. But overall the solos were quite rushed, not that focused. Well, the best tracks on the album are Seek and Destroy, The Four Horsemen, No Remorse, and Phantom Lord. These are just classic epics for me. The thrashy, crazy songs on that album are Whiplash and Hit the Lights. Really great songs. The weakest track, I think, is Motor Breath. The riff is good, but the track could have been better in general. Well, what about the vocals? Well, that was the point where James's voice was so high-pitched, and he didn't even think. He just screamed, yelled. And that kind of fits the album's, fun, crazy vibe. Well, let's go track by track and mention what's so awesome there. Hit the Lights, the opening track for an awesome discography and, well, a musical genre in general. The drum intro is now considered legendary. It gets me pumped every time I listen to it, with a really, really strong main riff. The Four Horsemen. Well, there's too much to say about how epic this track. The riff, the solos, the melodic breakdown, everything on it is just perfect. Motor Breath. Talk about a song which takes the riff and milks it all over the song. The song's main riff is everywhere, verses, choruses, in the intro, in between verses and choruses, kind of like Enter Sandman. Jump in the Fire. The song has a good solo, fun, groovy melody, and that was actually the first song Mustaine shown to Lars and Company, according to Lars.
Alright, so this is the first song that Dave showed us. Check it out.
It is slower than most of the album, and it's really, really catchy. Anastasia. Well, do we even have to mention it? How Cliff Burton blends in classical music with distorted heavy bass guitar. Just blows my mind. The best parts are in the intro and the last part, the last melody. It's just so beautiful. Whiplash, by far the most thrashy song on the album. As soon as the intro starts, you guys get pumped with the thrashy drums. The riff sounds like a heavier version of Ace of Spades by Motorhead. Phantom Lord. As I mentioned earlier, this is one of my favorites. The riff, God, the riff is just awesome, so underrated. And it has the first melodic interlude in the history of Metallica. Seek and Destroy. The most classic song on the album. Epic title, epic riffs, and the outro is just awesome. Metal Militia, the closing track on the album, is catchy with the really fast intro and the groovy as fuck riff and the mind-fucking middle section. I don't know what Mustaine was thinking in that part. But it's catchy. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the Ride the Lightning review.